Are there any mental hygiene practices to avoid finding yourself in this state if you work with people?
Well, I guess it's right to talk about dose dependence. There's a very simple word: fatigue. Everyone has their own threshold. If we admit to ourselves that, yes, I really am getting tired and this is enough for me, we need to think about how to organize our work week in such a situation. Because if you go from one shoot to another, from one performance to the next, and then in the evening, like I have now, you teach at the university with lectures and teaching until 10 at night, of course, a person finds themselves exactly where they are, and that's normal. It would be strange if someone said, hey, I just worked a full week, 16 hours a day, and I feel absolutely fine. So either it's a form of denial or the person doesn't fully understand themselves and is working themselves to exhaustion. In other words, getting tired is normal. At the very least, you should acknowledge this to yourself and organize your work schedule according to your physiology and neurophysiology. There's really no other advice to give here.
But it often happens, and again, coming back to the topic of young people, that as we get older, our threshold becomes lower. So we get used to, say, working 16 hours a day and everything seems fine and we can keep this up for a month, 2, 3. But then after 2 or 3 years in the profession, we realize that it just doesn't work like that anymore. Is that what people call burnout? Or is it simply a natural, let's say, maturation of the body?
Look, preventative medicine experts tell us that we should feel good as we age. It is not like after 40, all the diseases of the world should rain down on you and you should...
Your sand.
Fall apart. Yes, it's not like you have to do anything there. I don't know. Now, let me be blunt. I'll say something harsh, becoming stupid all of a sudden. That's not the goal. The other thing is that our people don't follow a healthy lifestyle. They don't do annual or quarterly health checkups. They don't undergo what's called a medical screening. Even though it's mandated at the national level and it should be done, this is all about the basics, right? A healthy lifestyle is the foundation. Next, if we're talking about moving along with the flow, for us, communication probably becomes more meaningful with age and requires greater cognitive engagement. In other words, it's not just about meeting up and chatting about something, but thinking strategically. Brainstorming is serious mental work. It's like you've just worked out with weights at the gym or run a marathon, say 20 kilometers. Would you be tired after that? Of course you would. And it's the same here. Why should the demands on the brain be any different from those on the rest of the body? Well, it's kind of like brain abuse. It turns out to be toxic behavior towards your most important organ. Don't do that to yourself. That's why it needs just as much rest after serious exertion. As we get older, our work becomes more specialized. It requires greater engagement and decision-making. And what does that mean? It means additional emotional stress. After all, a person thinks, now I have to fire. Well, for example, let's imagine anti-crisis measures like laying off some employees, including managers. That's several dozen families who will now be left without the breadwinner's salary, for example. It's a large number of eyes on you, questions, and so on, things a person has to withstand. So here, it's probably less about being young or not, and more about the level of responsibility. If a 25-year-old has the same level of responsibility as a top executive, they'll experience all the same things, but their body is younger, so they can handle it because they're healthier. They can withstand things that, say, someone with chronic illnesses cannot. If you don't have any chronic illnesses, but you do have experience, you might actually be stronger in this case because your body allows you to calmly get through such emotional and physical marathons. And experience lets you rely on it and understand that life doesn't end here. And even people who were laid off just yesterday can end up coming back and returning to the company. There are such cases. So when it comes to who gets more tired, I think that's also a question.
Galina, among your clients, there are all kinds of people, right? Ranging from Vladislav Vladimirovich Arsenyuk, our general director, to Varia Vedeniva, the founder of the publishing house Periodica Press. In this regard, I have the following question. It's a question that has become more pressing over the years, especially for many people recently. Are there any differences between a female manager and a male manager? And if so, what are they?
That's a good question. I think there are differences between this person as a manager and that person as a manager. I would put it this way. Probably I wouldn't use the terms woman and man. There is a difference in how the brain works. Even though feminists and other people start saying that everything is absolutely the same, that's not true. It works differently. At the very least, if we look at the genetic component, the X and chromosomes are different. The hormonal background is different as well, and so are the factors related to it. This affects our behavior and our development. In psychology, this is called identification. That is who I consider myself to be. But if we're talking about management positions, I would still focus on professional skills and say that, well, if we compare the aforementioned respected individuals, then probably they differ because each has their own point of view, their own cultural background in which they developed, and their own business direction. So it's a multifactorial polyetiological issue.